Hi guys, you're welcome to MJ Apparel tutorial, and in today's class we'll be learning how to sew a bustier with yoke. In our previous class we learned how to draft this bustier with yoke. If you are yet to watch that video, I'll be dropping the link to it in the comment section. And if you are new to this channel, please don't forget to subscribe, like, and also share this video. Here I have my fabric cut out, and I added 0.5 inch sewing allowance at this point and 1.5 on this side. I added 0.5 on this side of the yoke, and I also added 0.5 sewing allowance on the shoulder. I didn't add sewing allowance on the neck because I'll be using the bias to finish the neckline. And I also added 0.5 inch on this side of the bustier. This is the front of the bustier. I've also cut out the lining for the front and also for the back, but there is no lining on the yoke because I'm using a lace for the yoke. But if you're using another plain fabric, you can add a lining to it, or you can finish it up using a bias. I've also gone ahead to cut the back of the bustier, and I added 0.5 inch sewing allowance on the lower part and also on this upper part. On the side, I added 1.5 inch sewing allowance, and on the yoke, I added 0.5 inch allowance on this part and also on the shoulder. On this cuff part, I didn't add an allowance because I'll be using a bias to turn this part. But if you're using a plain fabric or a lining, you need to add your 0.5 inch sewing allowance. And also for the neck, there is no allowance on the neck because I'm using a bias to turn the neck. Next, I'll be attaching my wording to the bustier, and I'll be attaching it to the center panel and to the side panel. If you don't know how to pad a bustier properly, check out my video on how to pad the bustier properly. I'll be dropping the link to that video in the description box. Here I have attached the wording to the bustier. Next, we are going to be joining the side to the center panel of the bustier, and in doing that, you start sewing. You place it this way, the good side facing the good side, and start sewing from the lower part of the bustier down to the upper part. I'll do the same for this other side and also for my lining, after which I'll come back to show you the next step. Here I have attached the side panel to the center panel, and this is what it should look like after attaching the side panel to the center panel. As you can see, the cup of the bustier came out very well because of how we drafted it. So you need to draft it the way I drafted it so that you will get this result. I've also joined the side to the center panel of the lining like I did for the main fabric, and this is what we have. The next thing I'm going to be doing is to notch this side of the bustier. After notching, I'm going to go ahead to iron in between the seam. When ironing your bustier, you don't iron your bustier on a flat surface. If you do that, you are going to lose the curve of the bustier. So make sure you use your tailor's hammer or any curved surface so that the curve of the bustier will not be lost in the process. So next, you open in between the seam of the bustier and iron it. So I'll do the same thing for my main fabric and also for my lining. After ironing it, this is what you are going to be having, and I've also gone ahead to iron the lining of the bustier also. Next, I'm going to be attaching the yoke of the bustier to the bustier. So make sure you take note of the good face of the lace. If you're using a lace or the fabric you are using, take note of the right face of the fabric. So I'm going to be placing the yoke this way. But before then, I'm going to be notching the center of the yoke. I'm going to be notching the center of the yoke, and I will also notch the center of the bustier so that when we attach it to it, we will not have any problem or any shortage in the process. So this part here is the center of the bustier. So I'm going to be placing the yoke on the bustier like this, making sure the good side is facing the good side and the notch parts are also meeting. After placing the yoke on it, next you take your lining and place it on the yoke also, and you make sure that the right side of the lining is facing the right side of the fabric. After placing it this way, the next thing you are going to be doing is you go ahead to start sewing. You start sewing from the center part, and when sewing, you make sure that the three parts align together and you sew following the curve of the bustier. You sew it down to the chest line of the bustier. After you do this for this part, you go ahead to do the same thing for the other side of the bustier. So I'll quickly go over my sewing machine to do this, after which I'll come back and show you the results. After sewing, this is what you have. When sewing, make sure you follow the curve so that you will get the sweetheart neckline after turning it over. Next, I'm going to be notching it. After notching, I'll turn it over to the right side so you see what it looks like. This is what it's going to look like after turning it over to the right side, and this is what the inner part of the bustier look like. As you can see, it is very neat on the inside. The aim of doing it this way is to hide the seams inside, and the good side is going to be outside. So when you do it this way, you're going to be having a neat work. The next I'm going to be doing is to turn it over again and close up the side using 0.25 inch. I'll do the same thing for the other side, after which I'll give it a good press and also close up the lower part of the bustier. So here I've given it a good press, and I've also gone ahead to close the lower part of the bustier and the side. So this is what the front bustier is going to look like after attaching the yoke to the bustier. Now we'll be going over to sewing the back of the bustier. Here we have the back of the bustier. The first thing we are going to be doing is to sew the darts because it is not divided. You're going to go ahead to sew the darts, and the first thing to do is to notch the center of the dart so that it will be easier to sew. So I'll notch it. After notching it, I'm going to go ahead to sew up the darts for the lining and the fabric. I'll be sewing to the lining separately and I'll be sewing to the fabric separately. I'll go over my sewing machine and do that, after which I'll come back and show you the next step. So I've gone ahead to sew the dart. Remember, you are sewing the dart on the wrong side of the fabric, and this is what it looks like. I started sewing from the lower part and stop at this point. I did it for the other side too, and I've also gone ahead to sew the dart for the lining. I also did the same thing. This is where it stopped. I started sewing from the lower part and stop at this point. The next thing we are going to be doing is to attach the yoke of the back to the main fabric. The first thing you're going to be doing is to place your yoke this way. You try to arrange it so that you don't make mistake, and also take note of the neck, because the neck is a high neck. You can easily be confused, so you place it this way. After placing it this way, the next thing we are going to be doing is to turn it over and place it like this, like we did for the front of the bustier. So you place it this way. Next, you place your lining on it. After placing the lining, I'll go over my sewing machine to run the stitch. After running the stitch, I'll come back and show you the final results. Here we have the back of the bustier. I've closed up this part, and I've also closed up the side and the zipper allowance. The next I'm going to be doing is to notch it. After notching, I'm going to be turning it over to the good side. So after turning it, this is what we are going to be having. Next, I'll use my bias to finish up this cuff part of the bustier, and also I'll finish up the neck of the back. I'll also go ahead to use the bias to finish up the neck of the front of the bustier, after which I'll come back and show you the next step. After finishing up the back, this is what we are going to be having. This is what the cuff part is going to look like, and also this is what the neckline is going to look like. And I've also gone ahead to finish up this part with the lining so that there will be a neat finishing at this part of the neck. This is what it is going to look like. So for this upper part here, you can decide to fix a pin to it, or you can decide to attach a button to it and you create a buttonhole. Next, we are going to be going over to join the front of the bustier to the back of the bustier. So first, you are going to be placing it the goat side facing the goat side, after which you will join it on the shoulder. I will quickly do that and come back and to show you the next step. After sewing the shoulder, this is what we are going to be having. Next, we are going to be closing up the side of the bustier. The first thing to do is to arrange the sides. After arranging it, I will go over to sew it. Remember, we added a sewing allowance of 1.5 inch on the side while drafting, and we have used 0.25 to turn the lining. What we have left is 1.25. So I'm going to be going over my sewing machine to sew out that 1.25, and I will do the same thing on the other side of the bustier. Here I have closed up the side of the bustier. I used a color thread so you would see what it looks like. This is the 1.25 as I sewed out. This is what the outer part of the bustier is going to look like. So now you can go ahead to attach it to your peplon if you are making a blouse, and if it's a gown, you can go ahead to finish it up. This is what the final result of the bustier with yoke looks like. If this video was helpful to you, please don't forget to subscribe, drop a comment, and also share. Thank you for watching.